A new UN report predicts India will soon take over China as the world's most populous country. Now, in just a few months, India will take over from China as the world's most populous country. That's according to a new report published by the United Nations. Experts predict that India's population will rise to over 1.4 billion people, and the UN also says the global population now exceeds 8 billion. Apart from India, other fast-growing nations include Egypt, Pakistan, and the Philippines. Alana Armitage is from the United Nations Population Fund, who produced the report.
The big story is really how both India and China are going to address their demographic change. It's not so much about the fact that India will take over China in population numbers by about July of this year, 2023. But it's really about then what will India do? Because more than a quarter of India's population is between the age of 10 and 24, a huge youth population, so many possibilities to invest in young people's health, education, employment. And that we know really helps countries take off. That's what we call a demographic dividend. So the big story for the United Nations Population Fund is not so much the numbers and who has the biggest population or the smallest population, but how do we actually anticipate our demographic change, and how do we ensure that we are formulating inclusive policies to ensure that everybody's rights are being met.
Yes, I want to ask you about that later, but China is also now trying to implement policies to increase birth rates after, of course, having that infamous one-child policy. And it's not alone, is it? But are those policies trying to boost birth rate effective?
No, we know from history that the types of policies which we call demographic engineering just don't work. And so our report, in fact, is using this opportunity of this demographic milestone to really try to change the narrative, to work with countries to ensure that they are implementing rights-based policies based on evidence. Because we know, in fact, that just by trying to incentivize women to have more babies, we've seen in many countries all over the world, it just doesn't work. What does work is when we understand the underlying determinants of why women are not having children. And that is often the inability of women to be able to combine their work life with their family life. So really investing in gender-sensitive family policies is a much better investment than investing in trying to get women to have more children.
Also, your reports show that the global population now stands at 8 billion, which is hugely significant. But we also have issues like food supply, don't we, with Food and Agriculture Organization warning that the world could even run out of food in 4 years. How would you balance this?
Well, I think, any kind of population milestone, demographic milestone, whether it's reaching 8 billion as we did last November, or whether it's India taking over China, it does it makes people nervous. It leads to this kind of demographic anxiety, as we call it in the report. But what we're trying to point out is that often it's not the population numbers that are the issue. The issues are many other structural factors that we need to look at. So in fact, it's not the fertility rates. There is no ideal population number, but population numbers do matter in the sense that we need to be prepared for that demographic change. We need to know what is our age structure. We need to know, the population dynamics that we have in order to plan for that. But I think we're trying to address that anxiety and say, often we use these numbers to keep us from looking at what's really happening, whether it's inequality, whether it's discrimination. And we have to look at those human rights issues first and foremost.